As a business consultant who specializes and teaches on entrepreneurship, one of the things that I've grown overly cautious about is not to romanticize entrepreneurship, particularly startup entrepreneurship. Take it from a guy who has experienced numerous heartbreaks. Entrepreneurship is not the girl she says she is, and it's definitely not the girl you think she is. I won't lie though, as deceiving as looks are, you can't deny that she's an absolute belter. If you're watching this and are thinking about starting your own business, I can confirm without a shadow of a doubt that you are overestimating the upside and drastically downplaying the downside, which puts you squarely in the mindset that causes over 90% of startups to fail before they even crawl. It's not your fault. It's how our brains are cognitively wired. This phenomenon is known as optimism bias. And studies show, on average, most people tend to be optimistic and less pessimistic. In other words, people tend to overestimate the probability of positive events and underestimate the probability of negative events happening to them in the future. Over the years, society has reinforced these biases by giving us the most grandiose platforms to celebrate our most futile of accomplishments. Like, just hang on a second while I find the correct filter for my Starbucks latte shot in honor of me making it to Tuesday this week. Hashtag winning. A barrage of heroisms and violence, loss, and trauma has desensitized us to our own shortcomings. I mean, let's face it, no one wants to hear that odds are they're not special and do not have what it takes to survive significant financial losses. So, how does one confront the harsh reality that they're not Batman? And is there room to win for our feeble abilities in the entrepreneurship fight? To answer this, we need to first take a closer look at how fundamentally flawed we are as humans and how no one is immune from replicating costly mistakes made by others. There's nothing as embarrassing as saying, "You've got this," and thinking you can single-handedly move the office printer to try and impress an office crush, but then realizing you don't got this, and you end up tearing your pants in the process. This, of course, has never happened to me in the third week of a new job in a lofty Oval office. This is a metaphor for some of the big corporations we've seen caught with exposed backsides and having to file for bankruptcy and business rescue in recent weeks. Firstly, it's important to understand that economies have always been cyclical and will always be cyclical. In the words of Mustache Heartthrob, the ultimate Tyrone Davis, what goes up, I know one day has got to come down. It's always been a world of booms and busts. Busts are the dark times of recessions where GDP turns negative for more than a quarter, unemployment rises to scary levels, stock markets crash, business confidence nosedives, and governments take on huge amounts of debt to try and fend off rising levels of poverty. Busts don't just happen at a broad macroeconomic level, but also happen at a micro geographical or industry level. Microbusts are a lot like the pits of adulthood, when your homies have their shit together with steady careers and your startup entrepreneurship life is in shambles. And just when you think you've reached the bottom of the barrel, Avulega Masango welcoming you with open arms to a deeper level of the pits. Winning as an entrepreneur has got more to do with how you prepare for and manage the pits than how you can capitalize on upward trends, financially, psychologically, emotionally, and socially. The busts are inevitable. If organizations with access to the top talents in the world, access to huge amounts of capital, who have been around longer than you've been alive, file for bankruptcy and business rescue, then we better start embracing the inevitability of losses. We need to proactively develop strategies on how we can become better losers to stay in the game long enough for our businesses to sustainably ride the upswings of the boom times. The dangers of continued upswings are that they can lull us into a false belief that they're destined to last forever. The past 10 years from 2009 to 2019 has resulted in some of the strongest bull runs financial markets have ever seen. The digital disruption companies have received ridiculous overnight valuations because of overzealous investors who don't want to miss out on the juicy returns promised by these boom surfing tech startups. When asset prices look like they can only go up, everything starts to look like a buy. And no one wants to get left out of the action, and markets get caught up in bubbles of hysteria fueled by confirmation bias. You know that magically delirious honeymoon phase in a new relationship when no one wants to hang up first before she starts releasing asphyxiating flatulence in your presence? In times and markets with increased liquidity, it's very easy to rationalize poor decisions. It's like a big night out partying and drinking with friends. As fun as it is to hit those amapiano dance moves and take shots until you start slurring how much you love your friends, unfortunately, the night does not last forever. Entrepreneurs who get drunk on opportunities contingent on boom markets experience the worst hangovers when economies inevitably take a downward turn. Remember, kids, drink plenty of water, eat before you sleep, and brace yourself for losses and economic downswings. Early in my career, I was introduced to the character building experience of cold calling. A lot of people I know hate cold calling for the same reason they would probably suck at startup entrepreneurship. They can't come to terms with their brilliance, intellect, enthusiasm, and charisma being met with rejection. The challenge with loss aversion is, even when we score game-winning goals, the pain of the losses haunts us more than the glory of closing. I'm learning more and more that entrepreneurship is less about you preparing for the wins and more about how you factor in the losses, how you become a better loser. This requires mastering the art of dissent. I listened to a podcast recently with Daniel Kahneman unpacking some of the processes that lead to better decision making. And the first thing he commented on was protecting the dissenters. See, it's easy for large organizations to get bloated from drinking too much of their own Kool-Aid. Having constant reminders of our vulnerabilities helps us pick our losses better and build the contingencies required to survive these losses. My desire to get my mom to live on a yacht for the rest of her life got me to do a bit of research on the trading of financial instruments, particularly by retail investors. I found statistics in trading congruent with startup entrepreneurship failures. Over 90% of retail traders get wiped out and lose all their capital within months. Apart from thinking trading is a skill that can be learned and applied very quickly, the number one reason most traders lose most, if not all, their capital in their broker accounts is because they do not manage downside risk. Much like startup entrepreneurship, trading requires taking the time to learn and develop counterintuitive competencies that make us as comfortable as possible with losses. The only way to be comfortable with losses is to 1. Anticipate them in every trade. 2. Determine how much losses you can take with each trade. And 3. Master the discipline to walk away from the trading desk when you have reached the maximum losses you have set for yourself. If you think you're better than you actually are and think you can find or develop a strategy where you never lose, then the markets will humble you. If you're making big bets, like cashing in all your savings in pursuit of a big startup opportunity, you need to think about much more smaller opportunities you can take losses on so you can better calibrate your efforts towards the best opportunity. Keep a journal of all your wins and, more importantly, all your losses. Also keep a journal of the wins and, more importantly, losses of businesses who operate in the same industry or value chain you're trying to launch or build your startup in. JCPenney, the 118-year-old mass market retailer turning over $10.7 billion with 85,000 employees, recently filed for bankruptcy. Neiman Marcus, a 13-year-old luxury goods company turning over $4.9 billion with 13,200 employees, recently filed for bankruptcy. Hertz, a 102-year-old car rental company turning over $9.5 billion with 38,000 employees, recently filed for bankruptcy. J. Crew, Tuesday Morning, John Varvatos, Latin American Airlines, ComAir, SAA. The list goes on and on and on of very large corporations taking massive L's. L's that have been long coming even before the Rona pandemic. L's that should have been better foreseen. L's that should have been better managed through reducing debt and creating buffers of liquidity for downswings that are an inevitable part of economic cycles. You see, it's wise to learn from your mistakes, but it's even wiser to learn from the mistakes of others. Losing big means you did not master the art of calibrated efforts that come as a result of learning how to lose better by losing small consistently.